This is Professor Geisler at Los Rios College, and welcome to this short presentation of how to connect to the Los Rios College's virtual computer labs. And what do you mean virtual computer lab, Dr. Geisler? What are you talking about? Well, let's go into some details. The colleges realize that many of you, the students, don't necessarily have time or opportunity to come to campus to access computer resources. Okay, and started by many of the colleges during the pandemic. We have, and this depends on each college, but I'll talk about the district as a whole. We have made available virtual labs that you can access remotely from home. Okay, that doesn't mean that those aren't also accessible from on campus if you need them for specific purposes, and I'll talk about them in just a second. But primarily, these virtual labs are meant to be used from off campus. Now, why virtual labs? Well, because you might think, well, I've got a computer, right? I've got software. I've got it installed on my computer. Why do I need a virtual lab? Well, sometimes you may need to use software as part of your learning that's too expensive for you to install, or maybe too powerful to be installed on the average personal computer. And instructors can use virtual labs to make that software available to you, even though it can't be installed on your device. So how does that work? Well, fundamentally, your instructor will work with the IT staff at your college to set up what are called virtual desktops. So you're basically connecting remotely to a virtual PC. And if you want to think of it as like a computer that sits somewhere else that you're connecting to, except that computer isn't actually like a keyboard case, monitor or laptop. It is a virtual computer that is running inside of a server, one of many virtual computers. Okay, and that's really what this VDI gives us. And when I say us, I mean both your instructors and to you, the students, so that once again, you can have access to software and other computing resources, such as your Los Rios-based OneDrive or similar kind of storage. It may still be called the U Drive on your campus. You can actually get access to all that via the virtual labs. So, sound interesting so far? Okay. Well, let me give you some examples. For my students, I have them use Microsoft Access for one of their assignments. Microsoft Access is a database management system that is not part of the freely available Office 365 for education that you have access to as a Los Rios student. Okay, so yes, you don't need these virtual labs to get access to the standard Microsoft Office applications such as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, and a few others. But Access is not in that group. Okay, so in order for my students to have access, to Microsoft Access, I have them connect to one of Los Rios College's virtual labs, and I'll show you in just a second how that's done. And then they can use the virtual, via the virtual lab, the Microsoft Access software. Okay, and then they can actually, from that virtual lab, connect to Canvas and log in, and then submit the work that they have performed with Microsoft Access via Canvas, again, from the virtual PC that they are using. It's like you're remotely connecting to another personal computer. Okay. Well, what do you need to connect? Well, actually, quite simply, you need a Los Rios single sign-on account. And that's the same account that you're using to access your e-services, that you access Canvas with, right? It's that same W number and then your associated password. And of course, these days, there's probably also some kind of a multi-factor authentication methodology connected to that. And that's for security purposes, obviously, but that's the single sign-on account, okay? And then you need a device that's connected to the internet. And notice device is a relatively weak term because it could be a laptop, it could be a desktop PC, it could be a tablet, it could be your phone, okay? So you're saying, Dr. G, that I can actually use SPSS via my phone? Yes, not necessarily a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it because chances are you're looking at lots of data on a very small screen, and that's not the best use of your time and resources, I'm assuming. But hey, you're an adult, you can make that decision yourself. But the possibility exists because, again, what are you doing? You are connecting to a desktop environment, a virtual environment somewhere else with your device. And then you've got the tools available on your device, such as a touch screen or other buttons or voice recognition, right? Then to interact with that virtual machine at the other end. Okay. So, any specific operating system requirements? Yeah, not all operating systems are supported, but most of the common devices such as iPads or your regular Windows PC or Mac PC, this works from all those devices. Okay, so how do I then do this? Well, let me have you start on your device with your browser, and if you are watching this on a secondary screen, you can actually, let's say you're watching this on the PC, you could take out a tablet right now or vice versa and follow along. Actually, if I were you, I would watch this video on your phone or on your tablet and then follow along and do the actual connection with your personal computer as available. Okay? So what you want to do is point your browser to this URL right here. Okay? And this VDI for Virtual Desktop Infrastructure .losrios.edu. Okay? So then why don't we go there? So let me open a screen that would take us there. And this is this environment that you're looking at right here. So when I go to vdi.losrios.edu, notice it added a few things up in the URL on top here, but it did that automatically based upon your browser. This is something either precisely what you're going to be looking at, or depending on your environment. Again, if you're connecting from a phone or from a tablet, it may look slightly different. But I've got a couple of options here, okay? And it's still called VMware Horizon, whether or not it's called the same thing when you're going there, doesn't really matter. And from some devices, you may only have one option, or you may have additional ones beyond these two, but I'll talk about the two main options available here. The first one is what's called launch a native client, okay? What that would mean is that you would be installing a specific piece of software called a client software that would allow you to connect to the virtual desktop infrastructure, to your virtual desktop. And frankly, if you can install, depending on your device's capabilities, that virtual native client, okay? Actually, the client itself is not virtual because it's an actual piece of software. But if you install it and run it on your computer, it will give you some additional options. Like you might be able to say copy and paste, for example, from the VDI screen that you're looking at down to your computer. Okay, that would be with the native client software. If you're using the virtual labs regularly and you want the maximum functionality, that's the choice, if available, that you want to make. Otherwise, for most of us, if we're only going to use this occasionally, and of course, it depends on how much your instructor is going to want you to use this, then this VMware Horizon HTML access basically means that you are not going to download an additional piece of software, but that you're going to access the virtual desktop via your browser. And that's the option that I'm going to select. Before I do that, just FYI, down at the bottom right here, where it says click here to download the VMware Horizon client, okay? So that's if you wanted to have that regular connectivity with the additional functionality, that's where you would click to download that client, okay? You can't launch a native client until after you've downloaded, and if a native client is not found on your device, then it'll be part of the initial connection to have that client installed. Again, I don't need or want anything installed on my computer because I don't do this very often. So I'm going to go to VMware Horizon HTML Access. I'm going to click right there. And notice this is now asking me to log in with my W number. Here's that single sign-on, as we call it within Los Rios. So here's my W number. I'm not going to select to be kept signed in because I'm not going to be on for very long in this case. I'm going to say next, and then I'm going to submit my password. I'm going to say verify, and it may or may not ask you for the multi-factor authentication. Okay, and then we get to another logon screen where you need to input that same information one more time. Okay, so here's my W number and my password. Okay, and I'm going to say login. And I am now looking at the labs that are available to me at Los Rios College here as I'm recording this in April of 2026. And I've got a CRC for Los Rios College General Lab. I've got a high performance lab, and the lab that I tell my students to use because it has the software that I need them to use is the CRC Business and Computer Science lab. This is where you need to listen to what your instructor tells you, because chances are they have another lab for you set up that is not one of these listed right here. So just make sure you pay attention to the instructions that you're receiving from your instructor. Okay, select the lab that your instructor wants you to use. In this case, all I'm going to do is click on it with my mouse. Again, if you're doing this from a tablet, you may just tap on it and activate it. And notice it takes a second here at this point in time. And depending on your environment, you may be requested to grant permission for full screen. And I'm going to say, sure, why not? Now, full screen means that this environment, I'm going to say, okay, is going to take over your screen. Okay, and notice it's kind of fitting here a little bit. And it may be asking you if you have multiple screens, like I do right now, to do this a couple of times. Okay, and notice right now it is basically logging me into Windows. But hang on, Dr. G, didn't you start this from a Windows computer? Yes. Now, what I'm doing here, I am running a Windows computer somewhere else, a virtual Windows computer, from my Windows computer that I'm sitting at, okay? Which also means that I'm going to have a couple of different things to consider. For example, I have here in my Windows computer a start bar at the bottom, right? And I've got applications that are different on this virtual computer that I'm looking at from what's actually on my computer, okay? And if I click on this screen, so this is my desktop, and I'm going to scroll up and down a little bit. And by the way, if you wanted to, you could change your resolution on this, right? So I'm zooming in and out here a little bit with my browser to bring it back to my regular 100% resolution. How do I zoom? You hold down the control key or the Apple key on your keyboard, and then I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out, okay? So depending on the resolution of your screen and on your computer, you may need to do a little bit of troubleshooting here. But what you have here is, again, another Windows environment. And I don't need this pencil right here very much, so I'm going to try to drag it out of the way. I'm going to send it to the top. So that's out of the way. Actually, I'm going to send it over to the other side as well. But notice I've got my Start button in Windows. And yes, sorry, Mac users, these are Windows virtual labs, okay? And when I click on that Start button, I then have access to some pinned pieces of software. But remember, I wanted my students to use Microsoft Access, okay? So I'm going to type Access right here. And sure enough, here I can now get access to Microsoft Access. Now, the computer from which I'm connecting does not have Microsoft Access installed. But the virtual desktop that I'm connecting to does have it installed. So if I now click Open, I am now able to connect to Microsoft Access on that virtual remote computer. And I'm going to just, at this point in time, select a blank database to get things started. Okay. And I can give it a name and I can save it. And notice if I browse for a location where I can save it, I can certainly save it to the hard drive of this virtual PC. But the problem with the hard drive is when I close this virtual PC, the data that I store on the C drive goes away. So ideally, I store it someplace else. And if I click on this PC, notice right here, I can save this to my U drive at Los Rios College. And that is a network location that I can access from any on-campus lab. And of course, in this case, I'm accessing it from off-campus because I'm actually recording this video from my home. I'm not on campus right now, just like chances are most of you would be. Okay. And then I've got folders right here. So if I wanted to save this to one of my different classes that I'm using, and call it whatever else I wanted to, it's currently called database 1. That's not very descriptive, but I'm going to call it a test database. Again, just because I'm trying to show you how this works. I'm going to say okay. Okay. And it's going to be called a test database. I'm going to say create. And now I am in Microsoft Access and I am creating a database and I can add records here. So this will work as if I were sitting at an actual PC, this virtual PC, even though I'm remote controlling it, if you will. Okay. So what I'm looking here, once again, what I'm looking at is not what's on my PC natively. This is a remote virtual connection. Just for the fun of it, I'm going to add some short text. I'm going to call this hello, just so I make some changes. And then when I'm done, I'm going to say file, close. And of course, since I made changes, it's going to want me to save changes. I'm going to save changes. Sure, we'll just go with the defaults and say okay. And of course, this would be the application that you will be using from for your class, and it's obviously not always going to be Microsoft Access. I'm going to close Microsoft Access, and now let's see if I'm done with my assignment, then I can actually use a browser such as Chrome. Okay, and I'm going to double click on Chrome, and notice this doesn't have any of the bookmarks that you might have on your home PC. Again, this is not your PC. It's a lab PC, a virtual lab PC that's hosted by the college, okay? And if you wanted to connect to Canvas from here to upload your work, that's what you would do. So you would go through the student login process, Canvas, again, the same process. I'm not going to go through it now, but that single sign-on, your W number and your Los Rios password that you're using for everything else. And that's what you would use to connect to the in this case, Canvas class, the Canvas shell, as we like to call it as instructors, so that you can upload for your instructor's assessment whatever you've created here in this virtual lab environment. Okay, and I'm not going to go through that process. You guys know how to log on to Canvas, and I will let you do that from here. Okay. So let me go ahead and go to the top here and close this browser once again. So when I'm done with what I need to do, I've uploaded my work. At this point in time, I can take this computer here and I can shut it down. So if I click on, I just right-clicked on the start button, shut down or sign out. If at this point in time, I shut down, okay, notice what I'm shutting down here is not, once again, my computer. I'm shutting down a virtual computer. So let me do that really quickly. So that's how you end the session. I'm shutting down. It said shutting down, okay, and at this point in time, what you're seeing is that I've been disconnected. I'm going to say close, and if I needed to reconnect, I can do that from right here over on the left-hand side. Otherwise, this is at this point in time how I have now exited the session, the connection with the virtual desktop that allowed me to do my work for this class. Now, chances are this video, after I've recorded it, may not be 100% accurate the next time you use this, okay? Because things do change in computers. They change all the time. But if you understand, hopefully after watching this video, that a virtual lab is a PC someplace else to which you're connecting to access special software that may be required for your class, then I have done my job as your instructor. And hopefully you can then use those virtual labs and the software that they make available to you, not only for the required software in your specialty classes, but also, if you're out and about and you need to, get access to, I don't know, Microsoft Excel that you don't have on your computer at home, that's the way to do it. Okay, it's a great tool. I hope you'll find it useful. So much from here. Best of luck using the Los Rios virtual labs.